Well, Alex, first of all, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to start with, what is your definition of high performance?
First of all, thanks for inviting me, Jake. I appreciate it. Humbled,
Pleasure.
in fact. Having a look at some of the list of esteemed guests you've had, I'm way down that pecking order. Let's go in heavy, let's start in heavy. What is my definition of high performance? I'm sure there is a definition out there on the internet, if you Google it. But for me, high performance form, if you like, when you're truly at your best, when you're in that flow state, is an accumulation of a lot of things in your life, and I say that in your life because sport for me is a microcosm of life that you have to get aligned and get right, so you're able to be free on the field, and in that kind of, pardon the cliche, in the moment. So that revolves around understanding yourself in terms of all the mental aspects that you need to get right for you to perform, to be free. It's your nutrition, it's your physical. It's also kind of your well-being. I guess that's come into sport a lot more in recent years with COVID and a bit more introspection. It's getting all the things that you need to get as a person right, holistically, around your game. And if you do that around your life, if you do that, then that tends to, for me, transfer into high performance, or a performance at right at the top of your boundaries. That's high performance in its singular events, isn't it? And a lot of people are able to do that. A lot of people, when pushed with the right motivation, would maybe step into a ring with a Mike Tyson, if everything was on the line, like if your kid's life was up for it. But to be able to do it repeatedly, like over and over again, therein lies the holy grail, I guess. Repeated high performance is different from the singular event of just performing well once.
So can I stay then with another heavy question, Alex, and come at you with, I've read a lot about your coaching technique is very much around tapping into this sense of identity. Who are we? Why do we do what we do? And how we're getting there? How would you answer that for you?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Like I probably, well, only through my own experiences with other people, with the lads that I've coached, I'd hope to think ever changing, continuously growing, always searching, curious to improve, and with that, you have to be adaptable and flexible. Not to the extent where you lose sight and/or realizing the important things that lie at the core of you being able to perform, or in my case, coach well. Like, you have to keep hold of those things, but on the peripheries of that, in terms of your process and your purpose, and that does attribute to identity. I feel you have to be open and flexible enough to change on a week to week, maybe day to day basis.
So what is it you would say your purpose is then?
Well, right now it's about creating an environment where the players can grow and evolve into people that younger players aspire to be. I think that's an important aspect of the Sharks at the moment. And vicariously, that's one hat. That's the big tick. And it's not just the players; it's the coaches as well, because we have to support and live our lives by the same values that we preach to the players. That's one hat, and the other hat is to create a team with a winning, or not a winning, that's the thing. It's a mentality towards consistent, relentless performance, and that's in a focus around the process, isn't it? That's laid on to the initial statement And in doing that, Damian, I think you get the best of both worlds, but you get this team that's loving it, a group of people who's loving it because they're growing and they're feeling that together and they're doing it together. And that's when team sport is really rarely special. But you also get an understanding of how you win by almost taking it away from the outcome. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's the truth of it. And I'm sure I'm not the only person to come on this show and wax lyrical about that.
Now we're having this conversation, Alex, about leadership, thanks to Gallagher. And that's what I really want to talk about is your leadership. You know, you, through your own career as a rugby player, you've identified what high performance is to you and how and why you lead. I really want to get into some specifics here so that people that are listening to this that aren't in the rugby world and our CEOs and our colleagues and our teachers and our parents can work out where they can transfer your knowledge and your understanding into their own lives. So if I was to talk to you about being a modern leader, and I'd really love to get into some specifics here, the skills that you use on a day-to-day basis to get the message through to your players and to your team. Can you give us a story of a time where you've really had a player who maybe hasn't got the message and you've had to delve really deep into your skill set to get the message across to them? Or perhaps when you've taken on a whole group and the mentality and the culture hasn't been right and you've had to change that. Could you talk us through your skills and your go-to methods for taking a team to the place that you want them to be?
Yeah, I guess I'll try. It's always difficult when you're talking about yourself. It's almost easy to talk about the leaders that you aspire to be, but in essence, you're probably still talking about yourself, aren't you?
Correct.
I can give you some examples of what has worked at Saracens and what seemingly has worked at the start of Sale. And Saracens, way back when, were an underachieving, probably overpaid organisation. In stepped Brendan Venter and Edward Griffiths at the time, and it was very much coach-led. As an organisation, we were given 4 distinct values to live by, not just to train and play by, but to live by: honesty, discipline, work rate, and humility. Good values, you know, and quite obtuse in terms of their meaning. But they were driven almost fanatically so by the coaching setup. So you had to adopt them as a player, and the transformation in terms of what we saw on the field went from kind of 11th, 10th to finalists the first year to winning it the second, and thereafter, what was a young side, I had a brilliant, fortunate opportunity to grow being a young coach with this young side over the course of 10 years. So I was perhaps 25, 26, and I'm coaching a Jamie George, Owen Farrell and a George Crew, all lads who were like 17, 18 at the time, which kind of coming full circle back to my understanding of the necessity to be flexible and fluid with your coaching methodology, with your leadership methodology, with how you get the best out of these players and get the best out of teams. Because as these lads grow through the most formative years of their life, from 17 to 24, 25, to meeting a girl, to marrying that girl, to having kids, they become different people. And as I say, fortunate, because you end up learning more about yourself than you do about these lads over that span of their lives, or that span of my life. Because I've done the same. I got married and had a kid in that period as well. So from being a very coach-led organisation, you fast forward to maybe, I forget what years it was, but maybe 6, 7 years down the line, maybe 8 years down the line, and we'd won a few titles, and we were still basing the environment, the culture of the club around those old principles, the golden circles of Simon Sinek. You know, everyone's seen them, haven't they? The why, the how, and the what. Making it all about the why. And I presented this again because we just lost 5 games in the bounce, and this was a championship winning team. So to lose 5 games in the bounce is obviously something clearly wrong with the culture. So I presented it back to the lads. I got an Owen Farrell and said, don't get it. This is a guy who's adhered to it for like 6 or 7 years. Don't get it, Al. Well, what do you mean? It's there. It's the golden circles of success. Like, how do you not get it? Let's focus on the why. We're all about the process at the moment. But what that made me do, and him and the rest of us, was get into many heated and honest conversations, usually smaller ones, but occasionally with the group, to determine and to come back to what kind of a team we were then, to redefine that identity that Damian alluded to before. So we went from being a coach-led organisation at start to maybe a coach and player-led organisation 6 or 7 years in. Fast forward to another 2 or 3 years down the line, I did the least amount of coaching with that side towards the back end of the season that I've ever done. I was purely facilitating the intelligence, the motivation, the motivational drive that the players thought was best for the team, because they were that mature then. Now we're talking Jamie George being 29 years old, 30 years old. So I was just stepping back and letting them do what they wanted in terms of taking over, and we built that trust and that understanding over the years. Really, we were that together in many of our philosophies and processes that it was the best way. So to answer your original question, how do you lead? Like, in many different ways, depending on what the culture, the environment, and the team needed. Sometimes it's not what you want to do, how you feel you want to lead, how you feel you want to coach. Because I probably would coach a bit differently that I'm doing at Sale right now, but it's having the wherewithal, I guess, to be able to leave your ego on the hook and do what's necessary for the team.
See, and that's the bit that really fascinates me, Alex. Sorry to interrupt, but that bit there about, that comment there that you said about leaving your ego on the hook is a really important aspect of leadership. So how do you do that? How did you learn to do that?
Got a very mouthy wife. It takes me, brings me that down to earth every moment she can.
In what way, though? So, give me as an example of that, because what sort of feedback does your wife give you that does pull you up short and get you to maybe reflect?
I think what people from outside your environment are able to do is have just that kind of perspective that you don't have, being immersed in it. And for someone who understands you very deeply, like your wife does, or your best friends do, and I take their counsel with equal measure. When you're saying things from an emotional point of view at the end of a day, for instance, which you're probably just justifying your own opinions on, just to make yourself feel better, she will open my eyes to the reason behind the reason. So it's never the thing. People don't react or say or do something for the obvious reason. Rarely is it the obvious one. There's always a reason behind the reason. And then so that what it does is increase your empathy, doesn't it?
But give us an example then of where she's done that, and maybe you've gone back in the next day into the environment and said to a player, listen, I got that wrong yesterday, and it was based on what your wife might have said to you.
Recently? Okay. Well, it's. I mean, one of the biggest ones, and he's a coach now, so you can ask him about this. Not the recent one, but the biggest ones was a set I had with Richard Wigglesworth, who was a scrum half who went to my same school as me, played at Saracens for a long time, he's playing at Leicester now, and he's going to be a great coach, this lad. And we've got a lot of time for each other, but on the field, he's the most abrasive and aggressive, the most competitive, angry ant that's ever crossed the white line. So there was coaching sessions where I'd be running the session and he wouldn't agree with it, to the point where he's shouting at me. So I just sent him off. I just said, I can't have this. Like, it's not about me and you. You've got to go. And I could go home and, you know, went home and stewed in it. I'm like, I can't believe it. Like, why is he trying to undermine it and all this kind of stuff? And it was nothing to do with that. It was to do with our past relationship, and you tend to be more aggressive with people you love, I guess, don't you? When the emotions are flowing, you take those liberties which you don't offer yourself if it's just a working relationship. And that was the one time she's like, you need to ring him. Don't sit on this. Like, ring him up. And it was a 15-minute conversation, and we're all happy and mates again, and we've got a better working relationship. So I just find, I don't say women in general, but they generally are better communicators, certainly the ones in my life, and I'm from a matriarchal family, tend to give you that perspective, which sometimes is difficult to see yourself.
Nice. I'd like to read out a quote from the Saracens' Director of Rugby, Mark McCall, who says of you, Alex, he's one of the leading coaches of his generation, blending comprehensive technical and tactical knowledge with an in-depth understanding of the people in his care. His creativity, ability to articulate message, and a ferocious desire to improve players sets the standard of what it is to be a modern-day coach. Now, I don't read that out to embarrass you, because I know that you're a man who doesn't appreciate ego or doesn't have much of one either.
Well, keep it coming,
but I'd love to. But I'd just love to dive into 3 or 4 of these little areas, if I may. I think it's a really nice area to start. And first of all, the comment Mark makes about an understanding of the people in his care. First of all, how important is that? And secondly, how do you go about having that empathy for the people around you?
I think it's the most important thing, actually. Understanding them, understanding what makes them tick. Understanding all aspects of the life. Because the rugby side of things, for me, having been in the game forever, like, and I'm still not as old as some, it is the easier thing to comprehend. You know, you watch enough games, you do enough analysis, you immerse yourself in the sport for long enough, you can see the technicalities. And yet, the more rewarding and the more difficult nature of high performance of the game is the ever-changing constant that is people, where their life's at, where their head's at and stuff. So to be empathetic, to continuously put yourself out there, because it does take extra cognitive load on you, I think is the most important thing in an environment where I'm doing less and less coaching. The way you understand it is, if there's a conflict, then walk towards it like you know nothing. You know, ask the questions. That's hard because you automatically become defensive. So when there's conflict, actually go towards it and ask the questions. Have as many small and honest and often conversations as you can with groups of 8 or less people, ideally, because then you get that interaction. You get that flow of conversation. That's part of it. And then I also think meeting the families and meeting the wives is important. Like, we had a social on Saturday to watch the England game. Took them all out to Freight Island. Hell of a place. Had a brass band on, free beer. And the boys were really, really keen to just make it a lads do. And I was adamant that it shouldn't be, and it couldn't be, because I wanted the girls to meet the girls. I wanted the wives to meet each other. And I wanted the lads to meet each other's wives, because you learn so much about someone through the partner and the friends, the company they keep, you know, the partner specifically. And it was a really good do. And I didn't get shouted at once, not until I got home at least. So that's part of it. So it was empathy and how you find it out. Now and how you get there, and how you continue to get there. Rafi's my barber. Rafi Quirk, the next best thing to come out of English rugby. He's ace, isn't he? And therein, you know, I'd love to sit down with Rafi and have a really honest conversation for half an hour a week or every other week. But when you do that and you sit across a table, you automatically put up that barrier that I'm there to get something out of the conversation, and he's there to answer some questions, and there might be that lack of psychological safety. I don't not, but like social desirability, to say something that you think I want to hear. So when you can create a conversation that's organic, where he's in power, so he's got the clippers, you can see how often I get my hair cut because I've got a bit of a skinhead at the moment. That's when you learn about people. So coming back to this, as many and varied and often small conversations you can have, the more organic those conversations, hence why a beer or two helps, because the facade drops, the better. Like we've got a table tennis tournament happening this week in aid of Comic Relief, and I just know the number of conversations that are going to revolve around that table will be priceless. We've got a coffee machine, Manu Tuolangi helps all the young lads, a bit of a barista, shows them how to make coffee, but it's all the little interactions that go on whilst he's showing them that contribute to their combined empathy as well. So, and this is not a new concept. This is, I have leached this from Margaret Heffernan, who's a CEO of 70 companies who swears by social capital being the glue in any successful company. So it's something that I have invested in very heavily at the start, and I continue to. And I still think it's a bit of an undefined process. So as it is undefined, you can take it anywhere.
And from what you've learned from Margaret and what you've learned in your own space in rugby, what would you say to those business leaders listening to this that think, sounds great, it's all very good, but I'm busy running a business, I've got numbers I need to hit, I've got turnover I need to get to, I've got kids at home, I'm already working 15 hours a day, I have no time for these soft skills. Yeah. What would you say to those people?
Who's not working hard, who hasn't got kids. This is truly the extra kind of 5% that could take your business, take your team to another level. So first off, it's like everyone's working that hard. But secondly, it does take a faith, I guess, because it's an intangible. The outcomes of what I'm talking about are seemingly intangible. It's not like GPS, and I've said this before. Like sports science is everywhere now, isn't it? In all games, in all sports, and you can make incremental improvements through GPS data loading, like all our lads. But everyone's doing that. Everyone's onto that. Whereas because this is intangible and you can't measure it, people don't give it the credit or the time that it's worthy for. For me, it's part of the game that everyone talks about. You ask any player, any successful player, and they tell you how much of the game's mental, how much of it comes down to the top 2 inches. 50, 60, 75%, depending on the individual, but it's still a large amount, isn't it? Yet how many organisations or teams, and let's just say business, sport being a microcosm of business, being a microcosm of life, invest 50% of the time on the mental skills, or this, what I'm talking about here, this ability to create cohesion within a team. Very, very few do, because you can't turn around to an owner and say, give me so much money so we can build a mind gym, which we have. We built a gym for the mind. But because of the results we've had at the start, he's showing good faith as well in what we're trying to build here. A mind gym, just to let you know, is pretty much just a room. I said it to my brother. I was dead excited. I'm like, Pat, we've just built a gym for the mind. We're going to call it a mind gym. He's like, Ace, what is it? I'm like, it's a room where we do stuff on the mind. And as yet, there's not a lot in it, to be fair, because we're still trying to figure that out. But
Does it need much in it?
No, exactly. I mean, it is a space where at the moment we do some kinesthetic movements, some awareness of your own bodies, some breathing. We've gone through the mindfulness and the meditation route to the physiology of breathing and how that can control your emotional states and your sympathetic states. And all that's catching on, but I feel like there's so much more we can do in there. So, watch this space. We'll see.
One thing I've always admired about you, Alex, has been around the theme of creativity that I think a lot of business leaders can learn from. There's that old saying that so many team meetings or business meetings are where hours are wasted and minutes are taken, and yet people that I know that have been present at, say, the team meetings that you've had when you were at Saracens or now at Sale often tell us about how creative and memorable they've been, whether this is bringing the live wolves in or some of the other themes that you'll use before a game. Would you tell us a little bit around the role of creativity in your leadership style?
I think but creativity. Let's, as I talked about before, everyone's watching the games, right? Everyone's doing similar analysis. Everyone watches 3 games before they play a team, and then define all that information, that 16 gigabytes in and around of information, down to maybe 2 or 3 things. And you want those things to stick. Otherwise, what's the point of all that hard work? So it's trying to find an anchor. That's part of it. Trying to find an anchor, or using NLP, or using something that hooks the 2 or 3 things that you're going after. Because if they truly buy into it, remember it, then they'll have more intent. That's the theory behind it. That's part of it. But the other part is being sat there as a player for like 10 years and being utterly bored with what is to do with something that I should be loving. It should be the best time of your life, this, shouldn't it? Playing sport, being in a professional team should be brilliant, all of it. So I think we owe it to the lads to want to come in and to want to, not just interact, because a lot of what we have now is through their engagement, is through the conversations that I've talked about, but to want to be involved and to want to be engaged with what's going on in front of them. And if they do so, then you've basically got another session, albeit not one where they're getting tired, where they can take information in, not just about the game, but other things as well. That's part of their growth, though, isn't it? As a person, the messages are generally bigger than just the game. Creativity, however you find it, whether it's in the car or on the toilet, sometimes over a beer in the pub, like I say, talking to my missus, that's part of a perk of the job for me.
So can I ask you then, how much time would you spend coming up with a theme as opposed to just doing the analysis of a preview of a game that's coming up? So if you had to apportion percentages, how much time is spent coming up with that theme versus the actual review?
Well, I nicked this from the Crusaders. It used to be my main part of my job at Saracens on a weekly basis, drawing in the week, simplifying the 3 or 4 meetings I've had in the week down to one 15, 20-minute meeting. And within that, probably 1.5 minutes of the clips, and how we can make that fun, engaging, so they can take it home, talk about it. I want them to go home and talk to the missus about it, because if you've got that, then they're into it. And since then, it does become, sometimes it becomes bigger than the game. It should never really, you know what I mean? Because it shouldn't be about me and show hands and all that kind of stuff. It should be the reason why they're all there, which is to perform. So I was having a chat with Scott Robinson. We had a bit of communication right at the start of the lockdown with the Crusaders, and we talked about the processes. And he's a very creative person himself. You've probably seen him breakdance after he's won a title or 2 on the field. So there's a lot about him that I like. I'm not as good a dancer, but he's got a creative team which we've now put in place at Sale. So we've looked amongst the group and picked out some of the guys who are a bit more eccentric, who are creatively minded, who aren't involved in some of the more traditional leadership roles, attack, defence and whatever. And we called it the Deep Blue Crew, because it goes with sharks, and it's the crew that goes that little bit deeper, that thinks that little bit deeper than your average player. And we meet up once a week and we have a bit of a crack and we have a bit of a laugh, and we look at the next week and we look who we're playing, and we discuss a theme around that the lads would think is a good one, and how we can bring it to life.
So can you give us an example then and help us work through how you bring it to life?
Well, let's this week we talked about the luck of the Irish, the London Irish team, because you can consider them lucky. They came back and they drew with us 31 all down at their place. And they came back from Exeter 14 points down, and they won in the last minute against Saracens. I'm like, well, you look at all those and you can say they're lucky, but it's not the luck of the Irish. They do it week in, week out, lads. They're the best at scoring the last quarter. So let's define luck. How can we make our own luck? If it's out there and it's perceivable, how do you make it? So it was Seneca, the the ancient philosopher, wasn't he? I think he was a Greek philosopher.
One of the Stoics, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I knew he wasn't a company of more intelligent people. And he said that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. So now you can define it. Now we can work on it. So right, lads, this week we're going to understand what preparation looks like for us and where the opportunities lie. We can make it very tangible rather than just one of those things that happens with the bounce of a ball. So that was the week we had this week. And on the back of that, we have Irish-themed food on occasion. We're playing Irish teams. So the girls in the kitchen will do all that for us. We'll have Irish music playing, coming out the kit room, stuff like that. So we tend to anchor it in as much as we can.
Hey everyone, it's Jake here. First of all, thank you so much for listening to the Gallagher Leadership Series in association with the High Performance Podcast. You know what I'd love you to do? I'd love you to take a look at this quick clip. This is rugby player Ben Earl talking about Owen Farrell in the Gallagher Rivals Together series.
I think someone we probably both know very well is Owen.
Yeah.
And I'd say he's in that category. He doesn't let you have a bad training session, does he? Because the standards.
If you're a couple of percent off, you're firstly hearing about it, even if you're not aware about it. Then it definitely raises the standard. Everyone talks about. Obviously, he's been out injured for a couple of weeks with us. The standard of training when he comes back is mental. It's night and day, and that's just not like that. Anyone else is like not good enough. It's just that he's wired differently in that regard. Is that he wants the best. And he'll only accept the best, and that is so motivating for you as a teammate, but also for me to learn off.
You know what? There's loads more where that came from. The likes of Benno Urbano, Freddie Burns, Danny Kerr, talking in a way that we just don't see or hear sports stars doing often enough. Just check out the Gallagher YouTube channel, and you can also find the link to all of the episodes in the description to this episode. So take a look.
And what are the benefits of that then, Alex? What do you find that, like taking a chance and going down that more creative route rather than the traditional have the lads sat in front of a screen while you just go through the stats and facts and figures? What are the benefits that gives you by doing that?
The benefits, if you're able to, I think it's something to do with synapses. I heard it somewhere. So like you go to the Eiffel Tower on your birthday. Every time it's your birthday, you'll think of the Eiffel Tower. If you go to the Eiffel Tower and snog Kylie Minogue on your birthday, you'll link the three things together. So you build more of those synapses in terms of your memory construct. So again, someone's probably going to call and say it's absolute bullshit that, but that's my understanding. The more ways you can anchor it, a theme to the process of what you're trying to get, so your preparation to the look and how you make your own look, the heavier it sticks with you. So you have that shared mental model where you know what you're all going after, and that's crucial. That's like a military term, that, isn't it? Where everyone is on the same page in terms of what they're chasing, and if you can make those objectives or whatever you want to call them, focus points, as few as, well, they reckon 9, don't they? They reckon most humans can take 9 in from any one meeting. If you can make them 3, maybe with one underlying value, then you probably cracked it. But then on the flip side of that, if you get your analysis wrong and you've anchored all these things in over the course of a week with a bit of fun, and enjoyment's another one because it opens you up having a laugh. They go and do completely the wrong things on the game day because they're in that kind of fixed mindset that you've spent a week kind of honing.
That's the point that I want to mention though, because obviously you had all that conversation about playing London Irish.
Yeah.
And they did get a late try, didn't they?
They
did get a late try to draw the game with you. So
Lucky.
When you've gone through this process where you go, look guys, they're great late on, we need to attack that, we need to go through the process, and they still do it against you, I'm very interested to know what your mental process is for dealing with that. Do you get downcast? Do you think we got something wrong? Or are you able to go, listen, we did our absolute best? I mean, the phrase we love on the podcast is the best you can with what you've got where you are. Are you able to look at the fact that you still did the best you had with what you had where you were, and it just wasn't your day?
I always look to myself first. I generally blame my actions and the words that I've spoken in a week by way of influencing the lads and the coaches to see if there was anything I would have done differently or better. then again, taking your ego off it, like, and this was the sports psych Dave Jones at Saracen said, you actually think that you have more influence than you do, Al. Like, you need to step back and give yourself some slack, that you can't make things happen just because you've asked it of them, you know. So you have to put that into context. And then as every coach does, pour over the stats, take the emotion out of it, look at the game objectively as opposed to emotionally. And once you've done that, and that's the day after, speak to all the other coaches. I think it's important to reference what you've seen objectively, unemotionally, to what you felt almost immediately after the game. And again, this is a process that we took from. We spent some time with special forces and ex-special forces, and they call it hot debriefing. After every mission, they have each individual member of the team as a hot debrief, because, as you know, your own perception of what happened is rarely the reality, and your perception is probably going to be different to the person who's right next to you in the same fight, in the same battle, in the same game. And getting as much information as you can, then you can make a realistic or perform a realistic review of, did we get it right? Is what we saw what we felt? And after we saw it, how can we align our feelings better in game, post game to what was actually happening? Because that's the holy grail, the golden goose, I guess, is you're that in the moment, you're that aware of your feelings, and it matches up so much with reality, you're able to affect your next decision regardless of emotion.
I love this conversation about emotion and feelings, because like everyone has preconceptions, don't they? And I suppose when we knew we were going to speak to you, Alex, you know, I thought of this, you know, rugby player probably edging towards 16 stone, right, in your playing days.
Yeah, I'm strong right now.
Well over 6 foot, played for his country, played for Sale and Saracens, and I had in my head, I'd also read about the Wolfpack mentality that you've created as well, and I was expecting aggression and fight and determination and digging in and moving as one. Yet this conversation has been almost about getting success with the opposite of that. You know, psychological safety is a real recurring theme here, whether it's, you know, Rafi talking to you when he's cutting your hair, or getting together with the Deep Blue crew to go a bit deeper with those guys. I think this is a conversation that I would like to go a bit further on, the element of psychological safety. Do you remember when you first realised the power of it? Because I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you grew up particularly early in your rugby career where maybe psychological safety was not something that was prevalent or practiced?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. I still don't think it's something that you can have, but you can lose quite quickly as well. You know, it's a constant process of mowing the grass, as Margaret Effingham would put it. You know, you think you've got a garden, it's all looking really nice, and you've got your rockery and everything else, and a week later you go on holiday and you turn around and it's overgrown, it's looking like a mess. So you've got to continuously upkeep your garden as you would your atmosphere and environment to be able to have those honest conversations. It definitely wasn't even on the awareness of coaching setups or organisations, not in rugby anyway, because it was quite a fledgling and new in terms of professionalism. You know, you watch that Last Stand though, and there's elements of it being there, isn't there? I mean, a lot of what we're doing isn't it's all been done before, hasn't it? But the ability forget who that coach was, but to understand Rodman and what he was like and how he performed best, and to treat him differently. Like it's not one way for all. It's each to their own in terms of getting the most out of the individual. So the psychological safety side of things, it's like I say, maybe it's just me, but you know, I've got people around me who are also very good at it and interested in it. The coaching staff, that is, because they've all been ex-players as well. They've all been down a few roads where it's hurt and they've had to struggle and get back to winning ways. So that they understand what a player goes through during his life cycle, if you will, the ups and downs and the fight and the triumphs. But for me, it's the most rewarding aspect of the game, of the job, is to be able to have a chat with someone and feel like you've really reached them, or you understand them and they understand you. Yeah, that's the best part of it.
You know, like you've been in a culture at Saracens that was winning year after year and had that relentless appetite to keep going again. So you're now coming into Sale where you're looking to establish that same relentless drive to keep getting better. So how do you guard against players maybe thinking they've cracked it or thinking that they've made it and then starting to relax standards?
It does happen. You know, that's one of the biggest. When you give everything to a player and you look after him as best you can in every aspect of his life, sometimes some of them become entitled, and you do get that I guess that behaviours make complacency, as you said. So there's being aware of it, what it looks like, and sometimes you can tell it in terms of the workloads, their intensities, their accelerations, because it's always feeling that affects your behaviours, not the other way around for me. So if they're in some way entitled or think they're better than it, then you tend to see it in terms of behaviours, and that's GPS. Or you can see it subjectively, you can see it in body language, and then it's about challenging. And when it comes to the simple things that require no talent, I think those things you can address publicly. Like
what, for example, would you
explain? Effort and intensity and movement and speed off the floor. And you compare and contrast when you're in song and you're doing really well compared to when you're not just quite there, and whether that be culturally or in terms of processes, you can show that you can just do video modelling with that. That's part of it. Or you can force them to have the hard conversations as well. Force them to have them with each other. And then the third way is by the one-on-ones, isn't it? Again, sitting them down. This is where I see you at. This is where you see yourself at. Generally speaking, they'll find their own answers if you ask the right questions. Right?
Alex, would you just explain to us the power of allowing the players to have the conversation rather than you always being the one to be front and centre of these processes?
Yeah, it's massive. It's huge, that. But again, first of all, you can't just say, right, here you go.
Yeah.
You have the conversation, because you're going to get all those things we talked about, this social desirability and the desire for your strong talkers to talk first and to say the things that they believe. And that's not necessarily what a young Tom Roebuck or an Aaron Reid believes or wants. So how you fashion those conversations in terms of numbers, how you lead into it to perhaps break some of those barriers down so you get honest and an equal contribution is equally important as the conversation itself. There are techniques to that, but it's not hard. But it does require thought. And none of this is about the game, is it? This could be in any walk of life, because you get into those answers that they want.
Let's talk about players that have resisted your coaching style. Obviously, we've sort of touched on it slightly just then. When a player resists your approach and your way of working, as well as asking whether that player could do better, does that drive you towards self-improvement as well? Do you start asking yourself
100%
questions?
And the best players generally do. Them's the ones that challenge you most in session, post-session. They're the ones that come up and ask, why can't it be done differently? Or, they're the ones that I look towards in terms of feedback as well. And I have to say, Owen Farrell is the one person who's probably challenged me the most.
Can you give us some details on that?
Well, yeah, look, I mean, apart from running, shouting battles during high intensity sessions, like, does it get any much? It can't get much worse as in terms of an on-field relationship. And yet during those times, he believes that we're properly communicating. And I'll see him afterwards, and sometimes he he was so emotive, he couldn't speak. And yet, we'd just stand by him whilst he was taking his kicks, and slowly he'd open up and he'd share his frustrations, and I'd fashion around how we can manage the session better. I'd feed back to the other coaches who struggled at the time to communicate that with him and say, look, we can probably do this better. So again, that's the kind of hot debriefing. You generally get most of the fractious conversations post those really high intensity training days. Which every club has, second training day in.
Really?
Yeah, there's Owen, and then another different example is Matt Stevens. Remember old Matt Stevens? I think he's running wine lodges out in South Africa now, which is his vocation. Rugby was never his vocation. He was just really good at it. But he come into the scene like a senior prop who didn't want to scrum. And if you want to get better at scrummaging, or if everyone else wanted to scrum, then he had to scrum. So it was a weekly motivational conversation we had around how he'd do it for everyone else, and he did do it begrudgingly. And then even now, like Akuni Easterhausen, who I love, he's a great lad, but he's a bit older and his body's a bit more tired, so there's an understanding with him at times as to what he wants to do and what he needs to do for the benefit of everyone else. But it just comes down to those conversations. I know it make it sound simple because the conversations aren't simple. They're quite taxing at times, but I think they're necessary. Like when people say, they just got to do it. I don't agree with that. They would just do it if you told them to. But I don't want them to do it just because I told them to. I want them to do it because they want to do it. And then therein lies the questioning and the self-questioning and the awareness of what's best for everyone, as well as for them.
I think one of the big aspects of your leadership that really intrigues me, Alex, is your willingness to go outside of rugby, to learn about rugby, to learn about your craft. Would you tell us about the environment you've been to outside of rugby that has taught you the most, that you've been able to implement back in your world?
There's a few environments that have had big impacts. Most recently was time spent at the start of COVID with Melbourne Storm, with Richmond AFL, with the Crusaders. Obviously, they're still in the sport, but in a different hemisphere. Those three being three of the biggest teams in Antipodean sport, with the best record over time, which is what we're circling back to right at the start, is how do you create a high-performing team and how do you make that team resilient so they're able to do it time after time after time. These guys have and do. And we wanted to compare that to Saracens at the time, and we found that the fingerprint for success was pretty similar across all the organisations, bar the one thing that we're talking about, which is the mental aspects of the game. Richmond AFL do what we do now. Well, I've copied off them. Have a couple of reflective meetings in a week, purely reflective, purely conversational, in and around kind of what you could have done better in that flow feel state, and how's that aligned to your processes, and also what you need in terms of your mental readiness. Using examples of some of the best players, for instance, who generally tend to be more advanced with their mental prep, and that's where they're able to perform better over time. So you can hopefully fast track some younger players with their experience. So there's that. There's the amount that, say, the Crusaders invest in terms of the psychological support psychs and the rest. Then there's the people that, I guess, the constant conversations of people whose counsel I do trust, and there's loads of them. Like people say, you got mentors. Who's your mentor? Everyone needs a mentor, and I don't really have mentors. I've got mates. I've got mates who I love talking to, and it's not official. So, but I do have a lot of conversations, and Mark McCall's one of them. Like, I spoke to him for an hour the other day on the phone and talked about all things life and rugby, which is brilliant, isn't it? Because I don't know any two DORs of two different clubs in the same competition that have that relationship. Got my old coach from school who comes to watch every home game. Brian Gornell, he's a ledge. Sports Sykes, Callum Clark, who's doing a bit. He's going to move out to Dallas, I think, for the MRL, but starting up out there. Speak to him when I can. So
how do you choose who does or who doesn't get the opportunity to provide feedback?
I think it's in context of what the problem I have, the issue and I have at the time. It depends on whether it's more emotional support or advice that I need, or if it's purely a problem with being a DOR and something being novel to me. To take a Callum Clark, who's right at the very cutting edge and the fringe of what we're talking about, what I've been talking about, these mental aspects which are as yet undefined, because he's there and exploring it. We both feel that the edge, the massive strides you can make, as opposed to the incremental improvements you can make in terms of the GPS stuff, are still out there to be found. So I am exploring that. I guess that's where I'm exploring most of it. The area that I'm exploring most of it at this moment in time is probably more the things that you can do, which everyone can do, but on the periphery of the sport, to improve self-awareness, mindfulness, if you like, as an expression. To be able to understand and control your feelings and how they transfer into your sport, into life. We're on a bit of a path there, and to be honest, it can overtake. It can take you away from those things that are important, like I spoke about before, those core things that you have to get right in terms of your preparation, because it's still the game at the end of the day, and there's certain things you need to do. But in terms of an addition to what can make you special, I think it lies with all things mental at the moment.
So if there was one thing that you've learned on that discovery of the mental side of the game that leaders could understand and adopt in their own practice, regardless of their industry, what's been the best thing you found in your exploration, Alex?
Self-awareness. This coming back to identity. Identity is like a bit of a buzzword at the moment, isn't it? Trademarking, call it what you will, but it still comes back to self-awareness. So the individual self-awareness, the group awareness of who they are as a team, what they get energy from. You know, if you bring it back down to feelings in a game, when did you feel like you were in that flow state? When did you feel like you were under it? Seeing how that aligns all of them individually and how the team felt at that point in time. So yeah, it comes back down to those conversations where you feel psychologically safe to say, actually, no, I was stressed out, or I was under it. I was shouting. I was saying the wrong things because I was thinking the wrong things because I was in a bad place in terms of my emotions. To be able to say that and be that vulnerable post the game, I think is brilliant and crucial and a good value to have.
And before we move on to our quickfire questions, which is how we always end these episodes, Alex, I had a message from a teacher on Instagram a couple of days ago, and I'd love to share it with you. He said to me, I listen to all of these amazing leaders and these inspiring entrepreneurs and these CEOs and these artists and actors, and they all talk about exactly the kind of things that we've been discussing for the last hour. He said, but when you're a teacher, you don't get to handpick the very best thinkers, leaders, sports stars, colleagues. You get what you're given. He said, I'd love you to just ask the people when they join you on your podcast, how do you get to the kids that don't want to be got to at that time? Is there anything that you've learned that you think maybe might be useful for teachers to hear about getting to the children that are never going to be in the deep blue crew? They haven't got there yet.
Well, the deep blue crew, these are the guys that aren't our apex players. They aren't our leaders. These are, to some degree, some of them, those lost kids, I've given them, I feel, or to give all of them, each in their way, a sense of belonging. That's definitely it. Like, how and where do they belong within the team and the environment? To get that sense of self-worth. So they're coming in every day and they're loving the process, they're loving the task of what they're doing. And it doesn't really matter what that task is it? Because I don't understand how some front rowers do really enjoy mauling and scrummaging. Like, it's brutal, but they do. Maybe because they're doing it with their mates and stuff like that. So I would say, and I'm not experienced in this, but there's, and that it comes back to that kind of Maslow's social hierarchy of needs, doesn't it? That as long as they've got food and shelter and they're secure in terms of, for us it's contracts, but the kids at school, thereafter it is about social belonging. Once you've got that social belonging, you can move up the ladder and get your esteem needs and maybe get to some kind of legacy and transcendency. But at that point, if they feel like they belong, they've got a purpose, and they have that day-to-day self-worth, then you're going to get the most out of them. That's probably all of them, but certainly those lads in the past where they felt maybe a bit ostracised.
Really helpful, and I'm sure that the teacher that messaged me will be really grateful.
Oh.
So Alex, we're going to run our quickfire questions by you now, all of them with an eye towards leadership. So first of all, your 3 non-negotiables when it comes to leading.
Probably, I was thinking about this today, and I gave him 3 things. You see, walk into a place, and all our conversations are about, like, what kind of team are we? But you have to put yourself out there as well, don't you? You put yourself out there, and to some degree, they're either going to identify with it or incorporate what my kind of values were, what I was about going into this new job. And that's pretty fresh, so I can tell you what I said to the lads at the time.
I'd love you to tell us.
Which was first thing, honesty. And I know that's a big one that a lot of people have talked about. And honesty means trust, and trust takes time. But that's what we're after, to be able to have those honest conversations, to be able to be honest with yourself in terms of what you're giving, to honest to each other. So honesty was a vital characteristic of leading, but also the environment that we wanted to create. The second one was hard work, because no one has ever achieved anything truly memorable or lasting without working hard. It's just up there. You got to graft. Everyone knows that. But the third thing, and I think I said fun at the time, so we've got to have fun, got to enjoy it. But I think enjoyment is a better adjective than fun, because fun, you can automatically think happy clappy, can't you? You can think, oh, whistles and bells and everyone's having a good time and backslapping, and that might be part of it for some. They might need to come in and see the mates and have a cuddle, you know what I mean? That's fine. But enjoyment, like properly enjoying it, is something different. So it's not just about enjoying the triumphs, as I said, it's about enjoying the struggle. You've got to enjoy the fight. You've got to love both sides of the coin equally. And some, you could be a masochist, couldn't you? You could come in and just love flogging yourself in the gym. Some people get enjoyment out of that, but let's make sure we enjoy it day to day, because those fleeting moments of exhilaration you get when you're winning a cup are just that, the fleeting. But if you can enjoy the process, a la King Sisyphus, that old Greek tale of the king who got punished by Zeus to push the rock up the hill. If you can enjoy the arduous task of pushing that rock up the hill day after day, then you're going to be in a good place.
If you could go back to one moment in your life, Alex, what would it be and why?
I struggle with this one. I don't know if it's because I've had too many concussions to think back, or I'm slightly pessimistic in going back and looking back, because everything in the past is tinged with that rose-tinted haze of nostalgia, isn't it? I haven't got a big family. We haven't, and it's bigger now because My brother's got a couple of kids and my sister's got one, but there's only 5 of us at the start. Me and my mum, my dad, my brother and my sister, and my grandma. That was it, since forever. And she's an incredible woman, my grandma. She was an acrobat, and her husband was an Olympic diver, and she drove trucks during the war, the First World War, and that. So she was, as I said, a matriarchal family. She's someone who kind of crafted my mum, who crafted me to be the person I am, and I'm grateful for that. And I didn't spend enough time with her when she was really ill towards the end. I was into the rugby. I was into what I was doing, and yeah, I haven't answered that question. I haven't answered or given that answer ever before in light of a question like that. But I'd take more time. I'd spend a bit more time next to her.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah. You clearly are well read, and this is a difficult one for someone that likes to read. If you could share one book specifically on leadership with the people listening to this podcast, which one leaps out straight away?
There's a little story behind this as well. Phil Clark, Phil Clark?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's rugby league. He used to be a good Wigan legend. Now he commentates and presents, doesn't he? And I didn't know him from Harry when I was a kid. I broke my neck basically, 19, and I'm in the hospital, and it was his brother who did a bit of work with us at Sale. His brother's a good lad as well, Andy. And he come in with a book, which I still have, and I bought numerous times and I've given to players along the way, because it really helped me at that point in time, being someone who's so hell-bent on having it now, you know what I mean? And it's called Thinking Body, Dancing Mind, by someone called Chungilung Al Hung. So you have to look that one up. But it's basically the Taoism of sport, the Eastern philosophies over or against the Western philosophies. The Eastern philosophies of vulnerability and accepting failure as part of the journey versus the need and want to win, which for me can destroy you as a person and a player at an early age. So it really helped me, and I've got loads of good examples of other people in sport who adopted these kind of philosophies, and it just helped me to get some headspace at that point in time and to realise that it was a bit of a journey.
What would you like your leadership legacy to be?
I want relationships that I have with some of my coaches. I'd love that. And I had a great night Saturday. Just told you, been out on the social. I'm half into it. And we're out with all the Sale lads. And in the same place, Alex Lewington's having a stag do. Dressed up as a woman with Velcro tennis balls on his head. And he's there with his mates, and he's been on it all day, and he'd been on it the night before. But all the Cyrus lads came up and had a cuddle with him and had a chat with him. And I just thought, how good's that? It gave me a really warm feeling inside, knowing that I've got a relationship there that stood the test of a year at least, but certainly that's going to be there moving forward. So to be able to speak to them as people post the game, to enjoy some of the things that they're going to enjoy later in life because I've got a good relationship with them, I think that's the best legacy someone could hope for. And
finally, from you, Alex, your one golden rule to leading a high-performance life. This is, I guess, your one final message for our listeners on this podcast.
You've got to live those values that you preach. You've got to live by them. You can't, everyone knows that to get on in the game, it's got to be your vocation. It has to be. Too often, people, I think, pick up those values and principles when you get to the club and leave them when you get in the car at the end of the day. And I don't think that works over time. I think at some point you're going to get found out. So, and if you don't adhere to them, then move clubs or do something else. But if you want to get out, of the game, everything, then you've got to be wholly in, buy into them and live them.
Brilliant. Listen, thank you so much for taking the time. That's been the most interesting 70 minutes. And I hope you feel like you got something from it as well.
Oh, no, I did. Yeah, you've opened my eyes, and I was much more emotional than I ever thought I would be in a podcast. But no, you're good guys. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for inviting me.